The neon sign flickered like a dying heartbeat outside the dusty roadside diner, casting erratic shadows across the cracked asphalt parking lot. It was just past midnight in the barren stretch of highway that cut through the Nevada Badlands, where the wind whispered secrets through the sagebrush and the distant rumble of thunder promised a storm that never quite arrived. Inside, the air hung heavy with the scent of sizzling grease and stale coffee, the kind of place where truckers nursed their regrets and wanderers sought a momentary anchor. Behind the counter, a young waitress named Lila wiped down the formica surface for the third time that night, her eyes heavy from a double shift but sharp enough to catch the subtle shifts in the room's fragile peace. That's when the door swung open with a chime that sliced through the quiet hum of the jukebox. A lone figure stepped in, broad-shouldered and weathered, his leather vest creaking softly under the weight of miles traveled. He was Ethan, a man whose face bore the faint scars of old battles, faded lines around his eyes from squinting into too many sunrises, and a jagged mark along his jaw from a night he never spoke of. His boots thudded against the linoleum as he claimed a stool at the far end of the counter, away from the two other patrons. A weary salesman nursing a mug and a local farmer staring into his untouched pie. Ethan didn't look up as he ordered. Black coffee, no sugar, voice gravelly from disuse. But Lila noticed something off right away. Tucked beneath the frayed edge of his vest, glinting faintly under the fluorescent lights, was a small, blinking device. Not a badge or a pin, but something mechanical, insidious, a GPS tracker wired into the leather like a parasite. Lila's heart stuttered. She'd seen enough late-night news clips and overheard enough trucker tales to know what that meant. In these parts, trackers weren't for lost hikers. They were for hunters marking their prey. Ethan sat there oblivious, or perhaps pretending to be, his calloused hands wrapping around the steaming mug as if it could warm the chill that had settled in his bones years ago. He was no stranger to shadows. 20 years back, during his time in the service overseas, he'd made a promise to a brother in arms. Watch over the family if things went south. That brother never came home, his Humvee lost to an ambush in the sands, but the vow lingered like smoke. Ethan had drifted into the Iron Promise crew after that, a tight-knit band of riders bound by codes older than the roads they haunted. They weren't outlaws, not really. They were guardians of forgotten oaths, rolling thunder for the voiceless. But lately, whispers had reached him. Old enemies from a botched protection job, corrupt developers eyeing the crew's land for some shady casino scheme. A hit squad? It fit the puzzle too neatly. She hesitated, glancing at the diner's only other exit, a back door leading to the alley where her beat-up sedan waited. The salesman had dozed off, head on his arms, and the farmer was lost in his own world. Lila poured Ethan's coffee with steady hands, but her mind raced. What if she said nothing? What if this man, with his quiet intensity and the faint tattoo of a promise etched on his forearm, an iron chain linking hands, walked back out into the night and straight into a trap? The tracker pulsed softly, its red light a silent alarm. She remembered her own scars, a childhood promise to her late mother to always speak up for the underdog, even when it scared her. Swallowing hard, Lila leaned in closer than necessary, her voice a hushed murmur masked by the sizzle of the grill. "Mister, you got something on your vest, back there under the patch. Looks like it's not supposed to be there." Ethan's grip tightened on the mug, his eyes lifting to meet hers for the first time. They were steel grey, holding storms of their own, loss from the war, the ache of a crew brother who'd OD'd last winter, the weight of secrets buried under miles of blacktop. He didn't flinch, but a flicker crossed his face, the kind that spoke of recognition. "You sure about that, miss?" His tone was even, but Lila caught the undercurrent, the way his free hand drifted toward his belt, instinct kicking in. She nodded, sliding a napkin across the counter as if it were casual. On it, she'd scribbled quick, "3 black SUVs circled the lot 10 min ago. Get out the back, now." Her pulse thrummed in her ears, the diner's clock ticking like a countdown. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the windows, and in the distance, the low growl of engines began to pierce the night, too deliberate, too synchronized for coincidence. Ethan scanned her face, searching for deceit, but found only resolve. In that moment, something shifted, a stranger's warning bridging the gap between their worlds. He slid a 20 across the counter, more than enough, and rose slowly, his chair scraping like a warning shot. "Appreciate it," he said simply, the words carrying the weight of an unspoken pact. As he moved toward the back door, vest flapping slightly to reveal the tracker's glow, Lila watched, her breath held. The engines grew louder now, headlights slicing through the darkness like knives. He slipped into the alley just as the first SUV pulled up to the front, tires crunching gravel. Lila busied herself with a rag. Heart pounding, but she stole a glance through the window. Ethan melted into the shadows, his motorcycle hidden behind a dumpster, a sleek black beast that had carried him through deserts and dawns. The hit squad, 4 men in dark jackets, faces hard as flint, piled out, scanning the lot with predatory eyes. They didn't know yet that their mark had slipped the noose, thanks to a waitress who'd chosen honor over silence. But Ethan wasn't done. As he kicked his bike to life, the engine's roar a defiant thunder, he realized this wasn't just about him. The tracker meant the iron promise was in the crosshairs, his chosen family, the ones who'd pulled him from the abyss after the war. He gunned the throttle, vanishing into the night, but not before vowing silently. He'd rally them. The promise from decades ago echoed louder now, demanding justice not with fists, but with the unyielding truth of loyalty. Dawn was hours away, but by then, the crew would ride. The diner fell quiet again, save for the jukebox crooning a forgotten ballad. Leela pocketed the 20, a small smile breaking through her tension. In a world of cynics, one quiet act had rippled outward, binding fates in ways neither could have foreseen. Outside, the storm finally broke, rain washing the tracks from the lot as if erasing the night's peril. But the real chase was just beginning. The rain came down in sheets, turning the highway into a slick ribbon of black mirror under the sodium glow of distant lamps. Ethan's bike cut through it like a shadow, the engine's growl muffled by the downpour, tires hissing against the wet asphalt as he pushed the throttle harder. Water streamed off his vest, the tracker still clinging like a burr he hadn't had time to rip free. His mind raced faster than the miles. Those SUVs weren't random. They were pros, the kind hired by men with deep pockets and deeper grudges. The Iron Promise had crossed paths with types like that before, back when they stood guard for a small-town whistleblower against a land grab that smelled of bribes and broken laws. But this felt personal, a thread pulling back to the war, to the brother whose last words had been a plea etched into Ethan's soul. Keep them safe, Hawk, no matter what. He'd earned the road name Hawk for his sharp eyes in the desert patrols, spotting ambushes before they bloomed into chaos. Now, those eyes scanned the rearview mirror obsessively, catching glimpses of taillights that might be pursuit or just ghosts of the storm. The diner faded into the haze miles behind, Lila's warning a lifeline he hadn't expected. Who was she, really? A flicker of curiosity tugged at him, but survival shoved it aside. He needed his crew, 20 strong, scattered across the Badlands like roots of an old oak. They weren't a gang. They were a vow made flesh. Ex-soldiers and survivors who'd traded fatigues for leather, binding themselves to oaths that outlasted bullets and betrayals. Ethan veered off the main drag onto a rutted dirt road that wound through scrubland, the kind that swallowed headlights and spat out only the determined. Mud splattered his jeans, the cold seeping through to numb his thighs, but he welcomed it, kept him sharp. His phone buzzed in his pocket, waterproof case beeping insistently. He pulled over under a cluster of junipers, their branches clawing at the sky, and fished it out. The screen glowed with a single message from Marcus, his second in command. "Heard engines on the scanner. You good?" Marcus was the steady one, a former medic who'd patched Ethan up after a roadside skirmish with coyotes, human ones, chasing debts that weren't theirs to collect. They'd met in a VA hospital parking lot 5 years back, both nursing wounds that wouldn't heal with stitches. "One promise at a time," Marcus had said then, offering a hand that sealed their bond. Ethan thumbed a quick reply. "Tracked. Rally at the old mill. Bring the others. Now." He killed the engine, the sudden silence amplifying the rain's patter on his helmet. Kneeling, he pried at the tracker with a pocket knife, its plastic casing cracking under the blade. Wires glinted like veins, but he didn't cut them. Not yet. Better to let it lead them on a wild chase while he doubled back. As it clattered to the mud, he stomped it flat, the red light winking out like a snuffed candle. But the damage was done. Whoever planted it knew his patterns, his haunts. Memories surfaced unbidden. The night in the diner. How Lila's eyes had held no fear, only that quiet fire. She'd risked everything for a stranger. In his world, that kind of loyalty was rarer than clear skies in monsoon season. Revving back to life, Ethan looped south, the road climbing into foothills where the storm raged fiercest. Lightning cracked overhead, illuminating jagged peaks like the teeth of some ancient beast. He thought of the crew's code, carved into the clubhouse wall back at their desert outpost. "Iron binds what blood forsakes." It started with him and that lost brother, Ramirez, whose wife and kid he'd checked on yearly. Anonymous envelopes of cash, sliding under doors like whispers of redemption. But the crew had grown. Joshua the mechanic, with hands scarred from IED blasts. Natalie, the only woman among them, a nurse who'd left the ER after too many accidents, went unexplained. And old Samuel, the storyteller whose tales of honor kept their spirits from fraying. They'd rallied for smaller causes, escorting a single mom from an abusive shadow, standing down a corrupt sheriff, shaking down migrant workers. Each ride mended a fracture in Ethan's past, turning ghosts into guardians. The old mill loomed ahead, a skeletal relic from mining days, its silos thrusting against the storm like forgotten sentinels. Ethan killed the lights, coasting in silent, the bike's heat steaming in the rain. Headlights pierced the veil already, Marcus's truck flanked by 3 Harleys. They gathered in the shadowed yard, engines cutting off one by one. The group huddling under a rusted overhang. Water dripped from brows, mixing with the grit of worry. Marcus clapped Ethan's shoulder, his grip firm. "What the hell's chasing you, brother?" Ethan laid it out low and fast. The diner, the tracker, the SUVs. Murmurs rippled, Joshua cursing under his breath, Natalie scanning the tree line with eyes trained on hidden threats. Samuel nodded slowly, rain tracing lines down his weathered face. "Sounds like the consortium, those developers we spooked last spring. They don't forget slights." The name hung heavy. A shadowy outfit pushing mega resorts over sacred lands, buying off badges and burying opposition. Ethan had led the ride that exposed their fixer, a sleaze who'd roughed up locals for signatures. It bought time, but not peace. "We ride at first light," Ethan said, voice cutting through the downpour. "Flush 'em out, not with guns, but truth. Get eyes on their ops, leak it wide, for the promise." Nods circled, unspoken vows reigniting. But as they dispersed to prep bikes, a distant engine whine sliced the night, not thunder, but pursuit closing in. Ethan mounted up, the crew fanning out like wolves. The storm masked their thunder, but the real tempest brewed in the choices ahead. Expose the rot or let it consume them. Lila's face flashed again, her napkin note a spark in the dark. Maybe he'd circle back, thank her proper. For now, the road called, demanding everything. In the mill's shadow, as rain hammered the tin roof, the iron promise tightened ranks. Dawn crept closer, painting the horizon bloody, and with it, the ride that would test if old oaths could shatter new chains. Ethan gunned his engine last, leading the pack into the fray, the weight of loyalty a shield against the gathering dark. The first hints of dawn clawed at the eastern sky, bleeding pink and gold through the storm's retreating veil, as the Iron Promise crew rolled out from the old mill like ghosts shedding their shrouds. Ethan's Harley led the pack, its chrome catching the weak light in fleeting glints, the engine's steady thrum, a heartbeat sinking the 5 bikes behind him. Mud from the night's downpour clung to their tires, flinging arcs of brown as they hit the uneven trail leading back to the highway. The air smelled of wet earth and ozone, sharp enough to sting the nostrils, mingling with the faint leather and oil tang of their vests. Marcus flanked Ethan's left, his truck rumbling in tow with tools and spares lashed to the bed. To the right, Joshua's bike growled low, Natalie's beside it, her posture straight as a blade despite the chill seeping through her jacket. Samuel brought up the rear, his older Norton, purring with the wisdom of engines that had outlasted wars. No one spoke over the roar. Words were for campfires, not chases. Ethan's mind churned instead, replaying the tracker's cold glow in the diner's light, Lila's hurried scrawl on that napkin, a stranger's hand extending into his shadowed world. He'd promised Ramirez more than safety for a family. It was a vow to stand against the tides that drowned good men, the kind of corruption that turned brothers into ghosts. The consortium fit that mold. Faceless suits in high-rises, puppeteering local enforcers to carve up the Badlands for profit. Last spring's ride had been a warning shot, exposing their bribes to a tribal elder fighting eviction, but warnings echoed hollow without follow-through. Now, with a hit squad on his tail, it was personal. The crew knew the stakes. They'd all lost pieces of themselves to similar shadows. Joshua to a blast that stole his hearing in one ear, Natalie to a hospital bureaucracy that buried her reports on beaten patients, Samuel to the bottle after a patrol gone wrong. Iron Promise wasn't revenge. It was restitution, oaths forged in fire to mend what the world broke. They merged onto the highway as the sun crested fully, its rays slicing through lingering mist like searchlights. Ethan signaled a tight formation, weaving through sparse traffic, semis hauling freight and early commuters bleary-eyed in their sedans. The road stretched endless, flanked by sun-baked mesas that rose like silent witnesses, their red rock faces etched with ancient winds. He felt the tracker's absence like a phantom itch, but freedom came laced with urgency. Marcus's voice crackled over the helmet comms, patched through their ad hoc network. Scouts ahead. Joshua's got eyes on a black van tailing at 2 miles, not locals, too clean. Ethan nodded into the wind, visor fogging slightly from his breath. Let 'em follow. We head to the ridge overlook, high ground for recon. The climb to the ridge was a serpentine assault, switchbacks hugging the cliffside where gravel skittered off edges into yawning drops. Tires bit into the asphalt, the bikes leaning hard into turns, wind whipping at exposed skin with icy fingers. At the summit, they pulled off onto a gravel pullout, engines idling to a low rumble as the crew dismounted. The view unfolded like a cinematic sweep, the highway snaking below, dotted with distant vehicles, and beyond, the sprawl of the consortium's half-built resort. Cranes idle against the horizon, skeletal frames mocking the sacred canyons they desecrated. Ethan killed his bike, boots crunching on loose stones as he scanned with binoculars pulled from his saddlebag. There, the black van, creeping along like a predator scenting blood. Natalie joined him, her dark hair tied back under a bandana, eyes narrowing through her own lenses. That's their security detail. Saw the plates last time, registered to a shell company in Reno. She'd been the one to dig up the dirt before, her nursing shifts at the local clinic giving her access to whispers from the injured, locals roughed up for protesting, elders pressured into silence. They're not just building hotels. Word is they're laundering through fake charities, siphoning aid, meant for vets like us. Her voice carried the edge of old anger, a promise she'd made to her own fallen squadmate. Expose the lies that let suffering fester. Ethan lowered the binoculars, the metal cool against his palm. Then we hit their nerve center, the site office. No confrontation, just evidence. Photos, docs, whatever proves the bribes. Samuel leaned against his bike, lighting a cigarette with a Zippo that clicked like a memory. Smoke curled upward, blending with the morning haze. Reminds me of Nam, boys. Promises made in foxholes, kept on the road home. His stories were the crew's glue, tales of a sergeant who'd sworn to carry a buddy's letter to his girl, delivering it years later despite the shrapnel in his leg. Samuel's eyes, faded blue, held the weight of survivor's guilt, but his nod was firm. We ride clean. Honor first. Joshua, ever the tinkerer, fiddled with a drone from his pack, a small quadcopter rigged for stealth recon. This'll get us inside without boots on ground. Fly it low, snag footage. His scarred hands moved with precision, the kind born from diffusing threats in foreign sands. The crew had pulled him from isolation after the blast, a promise to never leave a brother adrift. As the drone whirred to life, lifting on silent props into the updraft, tension coiled like a spring. Below, the van paused, doors opening to spill two figures, hard men in tactical gear, scanning the ridge with handhelds that beeped faintly even from afar. They were hunting, but the crew was the storm now. Ethan's comm buzzed again. Marcus from the truck parked downslope. More incoming. 2 SUVs, same make as the diner's ghosts, closing fast. Adrenaline surged, hot and familiar, sharpening the world to edges. They mounted up in unison, the drone's feed piping to Ethan's phone, grainy images of the site office, file cabinets ajar, a laptop screen flickering with transaction logs. Proof. But as engines roared back to life, the SUVs crested the highway below, tires smoking in pursuit. Ethan gunned it first, leading the descent in a blur of speed and spray, the ridge blurring into a gauntlet. Natalie matched his pace, her bike a silver streak. They're splitting, one on us, one flanking. The chase ignited, wind howling as they hit straightaways, the consortium's hounds nipping at their heels. Bullets? No, not yet. These weren't killers in the open, they were intimators, designed to scare off threats. But Ethan knew the line blurred easy. A near miss swerved an SUV into a guardrail, sparks flying like fireworks, buying seconds. Through it all, Lila's face lingered in his thoughts, a beacon of unexpected alliance. If they pulled this off, he'd find her, make good on the debt. The road dipped into a valley, the crew fanning out to evade, their formation a testament to trust forged in fire. By midday, they'd shaken the tails, holing up in a dry wash amid Joshua trees that clawed at the sun. The drone's footage burned on Ethan's phone, emails tying the consortium to payoffs, including one to a sheriff's deputy, the same who'd overlooked the hit squad's plates. It was the thread to unravel them, a moral blade sharper than steel. But as the crew caught their breath, water bottles passed hand to hand, Ethan felt the vow deepen. This wasn't just exposure, it was redemption for Ramirez, for every promise the world tried to bury. The hit squad had failed once, thanks to a waitress's courage. Now the iron promise would ensure it never rose again. Samuel stubbed out his smoke, mounting up. Ride on, brothers. The truth don't chase, it leads. Engines thundered anew, carrying them toward the heart of the shadow, where loyalty would clash with corruption in a symphony of silent justice. The sun climbed higher, casting long shadows that promised no easy victories. But the crew rode undaunted, bound by chains stronger than iron. The sun beat down mercilessly on the dry wash, turning the air into a shimmering haze that distorted the jagged outlines of the Joshua trees like mirages from a fever dream. Ethan wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his glove. the leather gritty against his skin as he replayed the drone footage on his phone one last time. The screen captured it all, shadowed figures shuffling papers in the site office, digital trails of wire transfers labeled with innocuous names but reeking of payoffs, funds diverted from community aid, funneled to silence voices like the tribal elder they'd protected before. It was the kind of evidence that could topple empires built on lies. But Ethan knew truth was a fragile weapon in a world greased by influence. His crew sprawled around him in the scant shade, passing a canteen of water that tasted faintly of metal and dust, their faces etched with the quiet resolve of those who'd stared down worse odds. Marcus crouched nearby, sketching a rough map in the sand with a stick, lines radiating from the resort site to nearby towns where allies might amplify their find. We leak this to the right ears, independent reporters. Not the local rags they'll buy off, but we need a drop point, can't risk digital trails back to us. His voice was steady, the medic's calm that had saved lives in dust-choked tents overseas. Marcus carried his own promise, one whispered over a dying fire in the Hindu Kush, to a squadmate whose last breath begged him to shield the innocent from the fallout of endless wars. That vow had drawn him to the iron promise, turning battlefield scars into road-worn armor. Ethan nodded, folding the phone away, the weight of Ramirez's echo pressing heavier now. The old trading post in Sage Valley, neutral ground. "Joshua, you rigged the upload there?" Joshua grinned faintly, his scarred hands already unpacking a slim laptop from his saddlebag, fingers dancing over keys with the precision of a bomb tech. The blast that took his hearing had also stolen his faith in fragile systems, but the crew had rebuilt it, piece by promise. On it, encrypted burst to a secure server. They'll see stars before they trace it. Natalie stood watch at the wash's rim, her silhouette sharp against the blazing sky, binoculars sweeping the horizon for any sign of the black van or those SUVs. She'd patched up enough victims of the consortium's persuasion in her clinic shifts, bruises hidden under long sleeves, stories swallowed by fear. Her oath came from a night shift gone wrong, a patient whispering confessions of corporate strong-arming before flatlining. "Eyes clear for now," she called down, but her tone held the edge of someone who'd learned trust was earned in the breach, not the calm. Samuel finished his tale mid-sentence, the words trailing off as he pocketed his Zippo, its engraving, a faded promise ring from a love lost to the jungle, catching the light. "And that's how we carried the flag home, boys, not for glory, but because we said we would." His stories weren't just yarns. They were lifelines, reminding them that honor outlived the graves it guarded. The crew had found him wandering the highways after a bad stretch, pulling him into the fold with a simple nod. "You're one of us now." As they mounted up, engines coughing to life in the heat, the vibration thrummed through Ethan's bones like a second pulse. The dry wash erupted in a cloud of dust as they rolled out. Formation tight, heading west toward Sage Valley under the relentless sun that baked the Badlands into a furnace. The road to the trading post wound through canyons where echoes played tricks, the rumble of their bikes bouncing off red rock walls like distant thunder. Ethan led, visor down against the glare, but his thoughts drifted to Lila, the waitress whose napkin had been the first crack in the trap. What drove her? A random act or something deeper, a personal code mirroring his own? He'd circle back to that diner once the dust settled, offer a proper thanks, maybe extend the iron promise's hand if she needed it. The highway narrowed, flanked by scrub that whispered in the hot wind, carrying scents of creosote and sun-scorched earth. Marcus's truck trailed, its tires kicking up gravel that pinged against the undercarriage like warning shots. Halfway there, the comms crackled, Joshua's voice cutting through. "Hostiles inbound. 3 vehicles, quarter-mile back, same blacked-out rides." Ethan glanced in the mirror, spotting the dust plumes rising like signals. The consortium wasn't letting go easy. They'd scented the threat and doubled down. Evasive, split the pack. Natalie and Samuel, take the side trail to the post. We'll draw 'em. The crew acknowledged with quick signals, bikes peeling off in a choreographed dance born of drills and dire nights. Ethan and Marcus gunned it, the highway blurring into a streak of heat waves, while Joshua flanked low, his drone prepped for a second run if needed. The chase ignited in earnest, engines screaming as the SUVs closed the gap, their forms hulking shadows in the rear view. No shots fired, yet, but the pressure built, a psychological vice meant to break wills before bones. Ethan weaved through a cluster of boulders at the road's edge, the bike leaning perilously close to the drop-off, wind howling like a banshee. Memories flashed, Ramirez's face in the Humvee's dust, that final promise sealing fates. This ride was its echo, a stand against the machine that chewed up lives for ledgers. Marcus matched him stride for stride in the truck, horn blaring to scatter a herd of stray cattle blocking the lane, buying precious seconds. They shook the lead pursuers at a blind curve, dipping into a arroyo where the canyon swallowed sound. Hearts pounding, Ethan pulled over, the engine's heat radiating like a forge. They're buying time. We push to the post, upload, then vanish. But as they crested the next rise, Sage Valley unfolded below, a ramshackle cluster of adobe buildings huddled around a weathered trading post, its sign creaking in the breeze like an old man's sigh. Natalie and Samuel were already there, bikes parked in the shade of a cottonwood, Joshua's laptop humming on a picnic table scarred by decades of deals. The upload began, data streaming into the ether, a digital arrow aimed at the heart of corruption. But tension coiled as distant engines growled again, reinforcements perhaps, or the sheriff's boys on the payroll. Ethan stood guard, hand resting on his handlebars, the metal warm under his palm. This was the pivot, expose the bribes, the diverted funds meant for vets and families like Ramirez's, and watch the chains snap. Natalie monitored the progress bar, her face a mask of focus. 70%. If this hits, it'll ripple investigations, hearings, real justice. Samuel nodded, lighting another smoke, the flame flickering like hope in the wind. As the final bites transmitted, a low rumble shook the ground, not thunder, but the approach of more riders, not enemies, allies, a handful of iron promise outliers who'd caught wind via encrypted channels. They pulled up in a loose circle, engines idling, faces shadowed under helmets. "Heard you needed thunder," one said, a burly figure named Logan, his vest patched with the same iron chain emblem. He joined after a promise to his late sister, protect the roads from those who preyed on the weak. The group swelled, a silent vow multiplying, but the victory tasted tentative. Ethan pocketed the phone, the evidence now a ghost in the machine. We ride scattered, regroup at the outpost by dusk. As they dispersed, the trading post fading in the mirrors, Lila's warning echoed anew, a small act birthing this storm of loyalty. The consortium's shadows lengthened, but the iron promise burned brighter, oaths weaving a net stronger than any trap. The sun dipped toward the mesas, casting the Badlands in fiery hues, and with it the promise of confrontation, not with fury, but the unyielding light of truth. If this story's gripping you, hit that like button to show your support. The sun hung low over the Badlands, painting the mesas in strokes of crimson and amber as the iron promise scattered like embers from a dying fire. Ethan's bike hummed along a forgotten back road, the engine's vibration a steady anchor against the uncertainty gnawing at his gut. Dust devils swirled in the rear view, kicked up by the crew's diverging paths, Marcus veering north toward the riverbed hideout, Joshua and Natalie looping south through the scrub, Samuel and the new riders fanning out like protective wings. The upload at Sage Valley had gone clean, or so the encrypted ping confirmed. Files disseminated to a network of trusted contacts, anonymous drops that would seed stories in outlets beyond the consortium's reach. But Ethan knew shadows didn't fade with a click. They adapted, slithering into new shapes. The air carried the dry bite of sage and cooling earth, a sensory reminder that the day's heat was yielding to night's secrets, much like the evidence now burrowing into the world's underbelly. He throttled down as the road dipped into a shallow gulch where twisted junipers clawed at the twilight sky like arthritic fingers. Ramirez's promise echoed louder here, in the quiet stretches where doubts crept in. The vow to safeguard not just one family, but the fragile threads of honor that bound them all. The consortium's rot ran deeper than bribes. Whispers from Samuel's old contacts hinted at ties to wartime suppliers, the same shadowy firms that had profited off conflicts while men like Ramirez paid the price in sand and silence. Ethan had buried that connection years ago, focusing on the road ahead. But the tracker had unearthed it, a digital ghost linking his past to this present storm. Lila's face flickered in his mind again, her eyes steady behind the counter, a stranger who'd embodied the loyalty he fought to preserve. If the upload sparked real fire, he'd make sure she knew her spark had ignited it. A faint buzz from his comms shattered the solitude. Marcus's voice, clipped and urgent. "Ethan, hold vector, anomalies on the feed. They breached the outer server, tracing back to us faster than expected." Ethan's jaw tightened, the wind whipping at his vest as he scanned the horizon. The consortium had hackers, pros, who turned data into daggers. No time for evasion now. The outpost was still miles off, a fortified barn on leased land where the crew stashed gear and stories. He signaled a course correction, banking toward a ridgeline dotted with petrified stumps. Ancient sentinels that had weathered worse tempests. The bike leaned into the turn, tires gripping the gravel with a low whine, the scent of pine resin sharp in the descending chill. If they pinned the leak, the hit squad would evolve, from chasers to cornerers, forcing a stand that tested more than engines. By the time the outpost came into view, a weathered structure half swallowed by a copse of oaks, its tin roof glinting like a promise under the emerging stars, the crew had reconvened in pairs, bikes parked in a defensive semicircle. Floodlights hummed to life on motion sensors, casting long shadows that danced with the flicker of a lantern inside. Marcus was already there, hunched over a jury-rigged console of laptops and antennae, his face illuminated in blue glow, lines of code scrolling like rain on a window. Joshua tinkered nearby, soldering a jammer to block signals, sparks flying like fireflies. Natalie distributed protein bars and thermoses of black coffee, her movements efficient, eyes flicking to the tree line where Samuel and Logan stood watch, silhouettes against the velvet dusk. Ethan dismounted, boots crunching on frost-kissed grass, the cold seeping through his layers like doubt. "Status?" He kept his voice level, but the weight pressed, the moral crux of exposure. Truth was their blade, but in this world it often drew blood first. Marcus looked up, rubbing stubble-shadowed cheeks. "They're scrambling. Local news is picking up fragments, anonymous tips on diverted funds, but the consortium's lawyered up, spinning it as smears from eco-terrorists. We've got hours, maybe less, before badges show, the bought ones." His eyes met Ethan's, holding the shared memory of a desert night when they'd sworn to uproot such weeds, not for glory, but for the families left picking up pieces. Marcus had lost his own brother to a friendly fire cover-up, the promise to seek clarity, pulling him from civilian life into the saddle. Natalie handed Ethan a mug, steam curling like unspoken fears. "It's bigger than us now. Those funds? They were earmarked for clinics like mine, vets waiting on prosthetics, kids from broken homes getting nothing. Her voice carried the quiet fury of one who'd bandaged too many wounds inflicted by neglect, her oath to a squadmate dying in an understaffed ward, fueling every ride. The crew gathered closer, the air thick with the aroma of coffee and gun oil from cleaned sidearms, defensive, never offensive. Samuel broke the circle, his gravelly timbre cutting through. Heard a tale once, about a rider who leaked a general's graft. Cost him everything, but saved 100 souls. We ride that line tonight. Logan nodded, his burly frame shifting. The new ally's presence a reinforcement of the chosen family that swelled with each vow kept. Tension coiled as Joshua's jammer whirred online, a low hum masking their digital footprint. But outside, engines growled in the distance, not the crews, but intruders probing the perimeter. Ethan stepped to the doorway, peering into the night where moonlight silvered the oaks. 2 sets of headlights bobbed on the access road, slowing as if scenting prey. Not the full hit squad, but scouts, perhaps the same faces from the SUVs, testing defenses. "Hold fire," Ethan murmured, signaling the group. This wasn't about bullets. It was poetic justice, forcing the corrupt to face their own reflections. He grabbed a bullhorn from the wall, an old relic from rally days, and stepped out, the cold air biting like accusation. The vehicles halted 50 yards out, doors creaking open to reveal 4 figures in dark tactical gear, hands visible but poised. One stepped forward, a stocky man with a sheriff's star glinting falsely, the deputy from the emails, his face a mask of feigned authority. "Iron promise, we know what you did. Hand over the drives and we talk leniency." His voice boomed back, laced with the hollow ring of bought loyalty. Ethan's response was steady, the bullhorn amplifying his gravel. "Leniency for what? Stealing from the broken. We've got the truth out there now. Ride away, or the world sees your name next." The words hung, a moral gauntlet thrown. The crew fanned behind him like a wall of unyielding iron. The deputy hesitated, the night amplifying the rustle of leaves and distant coyote howls. Whispers passed among his men, the weight of exposure cracking their facade. One shifted uneasily, perhaps a conscience stirring, remembering oaths of their own, to serve, not sell out. Then slowly they retreated, engines firing up in defeat, taillights fading into the black. No shots, no clash, just the power of promises laid bare. Inside, the crew exhaled, the console beeping confirmation. The story was breaking wide, headlines flickering on Marcus's screen about investigations launched. But victory was bittersweet. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, the stars wheeling overhead like witnesses to redemption. Ramirez's echo softened, the vow evolving from protection to prevention. Lila's warning had set this chain in motion, a waitress's courage birthing a reckoning. As the crew settled into watches, sharing quiet nods and tales by lantern light, Ethan felt the bonds tighten, family chosen in the crucible of night. Dawn would bring fallout, but they'd face it riding, honor as their compass in the gathering storm. The outpost stood silent, a bastion against the dark, where old scars mended into new strength. The outpost's lantern light flickered like a hesitant heartbeat against the rough-hewn walls, casting elongated shadows that danced across the faces of the Iron Promise crew as they huddled around the console. The air inside hung thick with the scent of cooling coffee and the faint, acrid tang of Joshua's soldering iron, now set aside as the jammer's hum settled into a steady drone. Ethan's boots scuffed the worn floorboards as he paced, the wood creaking under his weight like an old confession. The deputy's retreat had bought them breathing room, but the night air outside carried the restless whisper of wind through the oaks, a reminder that truths unleashed didn't always settle quietly. Marcus's screen glowed with incoming alerts, fragments of the story rippling outward, from indie blogs to national wires, painting the consortium's empire in strokes of scandal. Diverted funds, phony charities, ties to wartime profiteers. The evidence Ethan had sworn to unearth for Ramirez now clawed its way into the light. Natalie leaned against a beam, arms crossed over her jacket, her eyes reflecting the screen's blue sheen. It's gaining traction. A reporter out of Carson City is running with it. Says sources confirm the bribes, but they're lawyering up fast. Expect smears by morning. Her voice held the measured calm of someone who'd stitched wounds while bureaucracies turned blind eyes, her promise to that squadmate in the understaffed ward, echoing in every word. She'd joined the crew after a clinic shutdown. Her reports on corporate-covered assaults buried under red tape, finding in the Iron Promise a family that amplified silenced voices. Ethan stopped pacing, meeting her gaze. The weight of it all pressed on him. The tracker that started this, Lila's napkin that veered it toward justice. We don't wait for their spin. Samuel, you and Logan hit the backroads at first light. Spread word to the old networks. Vets groups, locals who felt the squeeze. Make it personal. Samuel nodded from his perch on a crate, the Zippo in his hand spinning idly, its metal warm from repeated flicks. The flame hadn't caught this time, mirroring the tentative spark of their victory. His tales had always been the crew's anchor, woven from foxholes and forgotten patrols, each one a thread in the tapestry of oaths kept against odds. Like the rider who exposed the brass after Khe-San, lost his stripes, but saved his brother's kin from the scrap heap. We'll carry it door to door, brother. Logan, the newcomer with his broad shoulders and quiet intensity, clapped Samuel's back, his own vow fresh, to honor his sister's memory by shielding the vulnerable from predators like the consortium. He'd crossed paths with the crew during a roadside aid run, pulling a stranded family from a ditch while dodging suspicious tails, and the iron chain patch had felt like fate sealing shut. Joshua closed the laptop with a soft click, the device now a vault for backups, his scarred fingers lingering on the lid. The blast that scarred him had also forged his precision, turning explosions into encrypted shields. Jammers holding, but if they triangulate... He trailed off, the unspoken hanging like smoke. The crew knew the risks, raids disguised as warrants, assets frozen under security pretexts. Ethan felt Ramirez's echo stir deeper. That Humvee promise, expanding beyond one lost soul to the web of betrayals it had snared. The war's ghosts weren't just personal, they were systemic, the same greed that armed conflicts now devouring the home front. He glanced out the window, where moonlight silvered the parked bikes, their chrome silent sentinels. Lila's face resurfaced unbidden, her steady hands pouring coffee, the scrawled warning that bridged their worlds. A debt unpaid, a loyalty mirrored. The comms crackled suddenly, shattering the hush. An incoming transmission, encrypted but urgent. Marcus patched it through, the speaker filling the room with a gravelly voice Ethan recognized, old Ramirez's cousin, Thomas, from the family he'd watched over in quiet ways. Hawk! It's Thomas. The stories hit here, news of the funds, but they're circling, saw suits at the old man's place, pressuring for retractions. Said if the Iron Promise doesn't back off, it'll get ugly. The words landed like gravel in Ethan's throat, the vow tightening like a noose. Tomas's father, Ramirez's kin, had been the whistleblower they'd shielded last spring, his land targeted for the resort sprawl. Exposure was the blade, but it cut both ways, drawing the corrupt closer to the innocent. Ethan's fist clenched, knuckles whitening against the console's edge. "Tell him we're coming. Hold the line." He signed off, turning to the crew, their faces a mosaic of resolve in the lantern's glow. This ends at the source, the consortium's nerve center, that high-rise in the city. We ride at dawn, not for confrontation but delivery. Hand the full dossier to a Fed we trust, one untouched by their money. Murmurs of agreement rippled, the plan crystallizing. Infiltrate the shadows with light, oaths as their armor. Natalie stepped forward, her bandana slipping slightly to reveal a faint scar along her temple, a memento from a clinic altercation. "I'll ride point. My contacts in the aid networks can vouch." Joshua rigged fresh drives. Samuel mapped routes through backcountry to evade checkpoints. Logan checked ammo, not for use, but presence, a deterrent etched in restraint. As the night deepened, the outpost settled into watchful quiet, the crew rotating shifts under the stars that wheeled like impartial judges. Ethan took the first watch, settling on the porch with a thermos, the cold metal grounding him. The wind carried faint scents of night-blooming sage, a poetic interlude before the storm. Memories of the diner flooded back, the tracker's blink, Lila's murmur cutting through the diner's hum. Her courage had been the first link in this chain, a waitress embodying the honor he chased across miles. If dawn brought clarity, he'd seek her out, extend the promise's hand. Perhaps she'd join their rides, her voice adding to the thunder. But peace fractured before the horizon blushed. Headlights pierced the tree line, not probing scouts this time, but a convoy, 3 unmarked vans, engines purring with predatory intent. The hit squad evolved, the consortium's final gambit to silence before the story crested. Ethan hit the comms. Inbound, form up. Bikes roared to life in the pre-dawn chill, the crew mounting like Avengers from legend, headlights blazing defiance. The vans halted at the perimeter fence, doors spilling shadows, armed figures, faces masked. But Ethan spotted the deputy's silhouette among them, betrayal etched in his stance. No words exchanged. The air crackled with the standoff's tension, moral lines drawn in the gravel. Ethan revved his engine, the sound a thunderous vow, leading the charge as the crew surged forward, not to clash, but to envelop, forcing the intruders back with sheer presence and the weight of impending exposure. Tires spun, dust billowed, and the vans peeled away in disarray, taillights fleeing into the dark. But one figure lingered, the deputy, unmasked now, his eyes meeting Ethan's through the fence. "This ain't over, biker. Promises break." Ethan's response cut sharp. "Ours don't." As the crew pursued to the road's edge, ensuring retreat, dawn broke fully, gilding the Badlands in gold. The ride to the city beckoned, a climax of loyalty against corruption, where redemption awaited in the heart of the beast. The iron promise thundered on, unbreakable. The first rays of dawn sliced through the Badlands like golden blades, illuminating the outpost's perimeter where tire tracks scarred the earth like fresh wounds. Ethan's Harley idled at the fence line, its engine a low growl echoing the crew's unyielding resolve. As the deputy's van vanished into the receding shadows, dust settled slowly, carrying the faint scent of scorched rubber and sage, a testament to the night's frayed edges. The iron promise stood firm, bikes forming a phalanx of chrome and leather, their headlights dimming as the sun claimed the sky. No shots had been fired, no blood spilled, just the raw force of presence. Oaths manifesting as a barrier the corrupt couldn't breach. Ethan's grip tightened on the handlebars, the metal still warm from the chase, Ramirez's promise thrumming in his veins like an unbroken chain. This was the pivot, the ride that would forge redemption from the ashes of old betrayals. They rolled out in tight formation, the convoy cutting a determined path toward the city, sprawl on the horizon, where glass towers pierced the clouds like arrogant spires. The highway unfurled before them, a ribbon of asphalt flanked by sun-drenched mesas that whispered of ancient endurance. Wind whipped at Ethan's vest, tugging at the iron chain patch that bound him to his chosen family. These riders who'd become his anchor after the war's hollow homecoming. Marcus led the truck in the van, its bed laden with the dossier, printed logs, encrypted drives, affidavits from locals who dared to speak. Joshua flanked left, his laptop secured in a weatherproof case, ready to sink final proofs. Natalie rode right, her posture a study in quiet ferocity, the nurse's steady hands now guiding a throttle toward justice. Samuel and Logan brought the rear, their engines a harmonious rumble, guardians ensuring no tails slipped through. The miles blurred into a meditative haze, the sun climbing to bake the air with the dry heat of creosote and distant rain. Ethan's thoughts drifted to Lila, the waitress whose warning had unraveled the trap at its root. Her napkin note, scribbled in haste under fluorescent hum, had been a spark of unexpected loyalty, a mirror to his own code, born from a mother's dying words to stand for the overlooked. In the diner's steam and grease, she'd chosen honor over indifference, bridging a chasm between their worlds. If this ride sealed the consortium's fate, he'd return to that roadside beacon, offer thanks not in words alone, but in the iron promise's embrace. Protection, purpose, a family forged on the road. As the city limits loomed, concrete giving way to steel and neon even in daylight, the comms buzzed with Marcus's update. Contact confirmed. Agent Hale, the Fed with the clean slate. Meeting at the Federal Plaza, neutral drop, no fanfare. Hale was a rarity, a veteran investigator untouched by the consortium's tendrils, his own promise rooted in a botched op that cost him a partner. Whispers from vet networks had vetted him, a man who chased truths buried under bureaucracy. The crew wove through thickening traffic, semis and sedans parting like waves before a storm, the urban sprawl's clamor, honking horns, distant sirens, clashing with their thunderous unity. Natalie signaled a peel-off, her bike darting to scout the plaza's approaches, eyes sharp for any consortium shadows lurking in alleys or unmarked cars. The Federal Plaza unfolded like a stark stage, marble steps sweeping up to columned halls, flags snapping in the breeze under a sky now streaked with high clouds. They parked in the shadow of a fountain, water cascading in rhythmic sheets that masked the tension coiling in their chests. Ethan dismounted first, the dossier case heavy in his hand, its weight a culmination of nights, evading trackers and days unearthing lies. Agent Hale waited at the top, a lean figure in a rumpled suit, his face weathered by cases that never quite closed. No entourage, just a nod that spoke volumes, recognition of the rider's code in another's badge-bound vow. "Heard about your upload," Hale said, voice low amid the plaza's murmur. "This fills the gaps. Bribes, laundering, even ties back to those wartime contracts. It'll stick." Ethan handed over the case, their exchange brief, eyes locking in silent accord. For the ones they buried, promises kept. Hale's grip tightened, a flicker of shared loss crossing his features, the partner gone to a cover-up, much like Ramirez to an ambush veiled in red tape. As the agent melted into the building, the crew lingered, the fountain's spray cooling the air like a cleansing breath. Joshua monitored his phone. Alerts flooding in, the story cresting into full indictments, headlines branding the consortium's leaders as architects of theft from the vulnerable, vets waiting on aid, families scraping by, elders displaced for profit. Natalie rejoined them, a faint smile breaking her facade. "It's done. Investigations launching today. No more shadows." But closure came laced with reflection. As they mounted up for the return ride, Samuel clapped Ethan's shoulder, his gravelly voice cutting through the idling engines. "Reminds me of the old sergeant, delivering that letter across oceans. Cost him scars, but mended souls." The crew nodded, the weight lifting like morning mist, their bonds annealed in this final gauntlet. Logan revved his bike, the sound a triumphant roar. His sister's memory honored in the downfall of predators. They thundered out of the city, the sprawl shrinking in mirrors, Badlands welcoming them back with open horizons. By midday, Ethan veered alone toward the roadside diner, the neon sign now a steady glow under the sun. The parking lot was quiet, sagebrush swaying gently, the air scented with fresh brewed coffee wafting from the open door. Lila stood behind the counter, wiping mugs with the same steady hands, her eyes widening as he entered, boots thudding softly. No words at first, just a nod, the unspoken bridge of their shared night. "You made it," she said finally, sliding a black coffee across the formica, steam rising like a truce. "Couldn't without you," Ethan replied, his voice gravel-soft. He placed a small iron chain pendant on the counter, a token from the crew, etched with their emblem. "For the promise you kept, if you ever need riders." Lila's fingers brushed it, a spark of connection igniting. In her eyes, he saw the echo of lost kin, a mother's vow to speak truth amid silence. She pocketed it, a quiet smile forming. "Maybe I will. World needs more like you." He rode out as the sun dipped westward, the diner fading into the rear view. But the chain linked stronger now, Lila woven into the iron promises tapestry, a chosen thread in their family of oaths. The Badlands stretched endless, horizons promising new calls, new redemptions. Ramirez's echo hushed to peace, the vow fulfilled not in vengeance, but in the quiet victory of loyalty enduring. The road ahead gleamed, thunder in his wake, honor as eternal as the dawn. Thank you for riding with us through this tale of unbreakable promises. If it touched your heart, hit that subscribe button and join the Iron Promise family. More stories of redemption and loyalty await on the horizon.